listen to this guy. He's crack up. And then you've got son of a bitch. Kia ora. This is ASMR Cozy ToeZzz. I have spent my second to third day travelling up to Cape Reinga. And also to a guide today, as you can see, who knew a lot of history about the local area. And also about the river. It's really nice to find someone who's so connected with the land and to be guided around his hometown, given a local perspective. He literally knew about all of the different local landmarks. There were some really beautiful trees and lots of spring lamps as we approached Cape Reinga.
Right down there. Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah, you can stand up, guys.
There's something really interesting about being at the top of the North Island. Something spiritually significant, like what the local Māori tangata whenua was saying. This was a really sweet South African family. I sat next to them on the bus and they were so kind. They were taking their 8-year-old daughter on a trip from the top of New Zealand to the bottom. This wall reminds me of a little bit of like a medieval stone wall that you'd find way back when people lived much more simply. Looking back on the footage, I can say that this was a really beautiful moment to behold. Even though the weather was a little bit rainy and not quite what I expected. The company was rich and full, and it was such a beautiful day nonetheless. I smiled so often, and a new excitement filled me up. And here's some funny photos of me. And then we come to the sand dunes. I did have a go, I must admit, and got a hairful of sand because of it. Here we come down 90 Mile Beach. And we had to time it really well with the tides, because if the tide was in too much, we wouldn't be able to reach our off-ramp. Our driver knew absolutely everything about 90 Mile Beach. It stayed overcast and rainy the whole day right until we left the beach. The irony.
I'll give it a go.
I thought that I would give
Luckily I'm a Kiwi.
the track a drive because he made a joke. I refer to being a Kiwi because we're known as being quite practical. Here we come to the Coyote Museum, and this was the hollowed out inside of a coyote tree, native to New Zealand. Tane Mahuta, the king of the forest. And in the shop there were beautiful bowls and shakers and all kinds of little things carved out of coyote. I realised that the way that I've edited this video has been... Look, I'm skipping back to the beach, but this is important. Wild horses. And just as the driver talked about the wild horses, they were there. And then we found our way back to the Coyote Lodge, again, where I took you last time. And here we go up the stairs.
Pretty cool.
It is.
It was so relaxing, and there was something so grounding about being inside of a Cody tree. What a beautiful piece of art. There was such a beautiful smell that came from inside the tree. And again, from the beautiful carvings that were laid out so carefully. Being in Kaitaia, you would hope to find kaitaia fire.
So I just got back to my B&B and
It felt so good to get back.
Look at this bed. So clean.
It kind of reminds me of my Nana's house. She's passed away, but she always had black and white furnishings, and she was very elegant. As you can see, I'm very elegant with my bottle of wine.
Cute little bathroom.
It has been such a beautiful journey this far. And so when I come to the end of my journey, there's nothing like a bit of Michael Bublé to settle down. Okay, nothing like a hot shower to wash the day away. And of course, nothing like your own bed throw from home, your own soft toy, and your own pillow. Just to make the room feel that much more like yours. But don't forget about candles. Or wine. It's time to have some me time. And because it's December, I'm allowed to play Christmas music now. Even though I was in November.
Cheers.
I hope you. Kia ora, good evening, everyone. So I thought that I could read to you the rest of the chapter that I read last night, plus maybe one more chapter if you're lucky. Now, looking back on last night's video, I realized that I talked a bit fast because when I was listening to it back, I found that it wasn't slow enough to be relaxing for me. So, just going by my own opinion, I'm going to slow it down a little bit tonight so that you can find it to be a very soothing and relaxing video, which is what I want it to be. That's the purpose. Okay, so just gotta find the page that I wrote to. Okay, so I've read that one. Now, I think I'm up to here. Okay. I've already read this part, but I'm just gonna backtrack it. I just realized I was looking at the microphone. So classy. Okay, just gonna backtrack a little bit. I'm sorry, I would have read a little bit of this last night, but just so you know where you're up to. Okay. Come on and have a game of Quidditch in the orchard, Harry, said Ron. Come on, 3 on 3. You can try out the Ronski feint. Ron, said Hermione, in a I don't think you're being very sensitive sort of voice. Harry doesn't want to play Quidditch right now. He's worried and he's tired. We all need to go to bed. Yeah, I want to play Quidditch, said Harry suddenly. Hang on, I'll get my firebolt. Hermione left the room, muttering something which sounded much like boys. Mr. Weasley nor Percy was at home much over the following week. Both left the house each morning before the rest of the family got up and returned well after dinner every night. "It's been absolute uproar," Percy told them importantly, the Sunday evening before they were due to return to Hogwarts. "I've been putting out fires all week. People keep sending howlers, and of course if you don't open a howler straight away, it explodes. Scorch marks all over my desk, and my best quill reduced to cinders." "Why are they all sending howlers?" asked Ginny, who was mending a copy of 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi with speller tape on the rug in front of the living room fire. "Complaining about security at the World Cup," said Percy. "They want compensation for their ruined property. Mundungus Fletcher's put in a claim for a 12-bedroomed tent with an ensuite jacuzzi, but I've got his number. I know for a fact he was sleeping under a cloak propped on sticks." Mrs. Weasley glanced at the grandfather clock in their corner. Harry liked this clock. It was completely useless if you wanted to know the time, but otherwise very informative. It had 9 golden hands, and each of them was engraved with one of the Weasley family's names. There were no numerals around the face, but descriptions of where each family might be. Home, school, and work were there, but there was also lost, hospital, prison, and in the position where the number 12 would be on a normal clock, mortal peril. 8 of the hands were currently pointing at the home position, but Mr. Weasley's, which was the longest, was still pointing at work. Mrs. Weasley sighed. "Your father hasn't had to go into the office at weekends since the days of you-know-who," she said. "They're working him far too hard. His dinner's going to be ruined if he doesn't come home soon." "Well, father feels he's got to make up for his mistake at the match, doesn't he?" said Percy. "If truth be told, he was a tad unwise to make a public statement without clearing it with his head of department first. Don't you dare blame your father for what that wretched Skeeter woman wrote," said Mrs. Weasley, flaring up at once. "If Dad hadn't said anything, old Rita would have just said it was disgraceful that nobody from the ministry had commented," said Bill, who was playing chess with Ron. "Rita Skeeter never makes anyone look good. Remember, she interviewed all the Gringotts curse breakers once and called me a long-haired pillock." "Well, it is a bit long, dear," said Mrs. Weasley gently. "If you'd just let me—" "No, Mum." Rain lashed against the living room window. Hermione was immersed in the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 4. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 4. Copies of which Mrs. Weasley had brought for her, Harry and Ron and Diagon Alley. Charlie was daring a fireproof balaclava. Harry was polishing his firebolt, the broomstick servicing kit Hermione had given him for his 13th birthday open at his feet. Fred and George were sitting in a far corner, quills out, talking in whispers, their heads bent over a piece of parchment. "What are you two up to?" said Mrs. Weasley sharply, her eyes on the twins. "Homework," said Fred vaguely. "Don't be ridiculous, you're still on holiday," said Mrs. Weasley. "Yeah, we've left it a bit late," said George. "You're not by any chance writing a new order form, are you?" said Mrs. Weasley shrewdly. "You wouldn't be thinking of restarting Weasley's Wizard Wheezes by any chance?" "Now, Mum," said Fred, looking up at her, a pained look on his face. "If the Hogwarts Express crashed tomorrow and George and I died, how would you feel knowing the last thing we ever heard from you was an unfounded accusation?" Everyone laughed, even Mrs. Weasley. "Oh, your father's coming," she said suddenly, looking up at the clock again. Mr. Weasley's hand had suddenly spun from work to travelling.
A second later, it had shuddered to a halt on home with the others, and they heard him calling from the kitchen. "Coming, Arthur," called Mrs. Weasley, hurrying out of the room. A few moments later, Mr. Weasley had come into the warm living room, carrying his dinner on a tray. He looked completely exhausted. "Well, the fat's really in the fire now," he told Mrs. Weasley as he sat down in an armchair near the fire and toyed unenthusiastically with his somewhat shriveled cauliflower. "Rita Skeeter has been ferreting around all week, looking for more ministry mess-ups to report. And now she's found out about poor old Bertha going missing, so that'll be the headline in the Prophet tomorrow. I told Bagman he should have sent someone to look for her ages ago." "Mr. Crouch has been saying it for weeks and weeks," said Percy swiftly. "Crouch is very lucky Rita hasn't found out about Winky," said Mr. Weasley irritably. "There'd be a week's worth of headlines in his house elf being caught holding the wand that conjured the dark mark." "I thought we were all agreed that the elf, while irresponsible, did not conjure the mark," said Percy hotly. "If you ask me, Mr. Crouch is very lucky no one at the Daily Prophet knows how mean he is to elves," said Hermione angrily. "Now, look here, Hermione," said Percy. "A high-ranking ministry official like Mr. Crouch deserves unswerving obedience from his servants." "His slave, you mean," said Hermione, her voice rising shrilly. "Because he didn't pay Winky, did he? I think you all better go upstairs and check that you've packed properly," said Mrs. Weasley, breaking up the argument. "Come on now, all of you." Harry repacked his broomstick servicing kit, put his firebolt over his shoulder, and went back upstairs with Ron. The rain sounded even louder at the top of the house, accompanied by loud whistlings and moans from the wind, not to mention sporadic howls from the ghoul who lived in the attic. Pidgeon began twittering and zooming around his cage again, and when they ended, the sight of the half-packed trunk seemed to have sent him into a frenzy of excitement. "Bung him some owl treats," said Ron, throwing a packet across to Harry. "It might shut him up." Harry poked a few owl treats through the bars of Pidgeon's cage, then turned to his trunk. Hedwig's cage stood next to it, still empty. "It's been over a week," Harry said, looking at Hedwig's deserted perch. "Ron, you don't reckon Sirius has been caught, do you?" "Nah, it would have been in the Daily Prophet," said Ron. "The ministry would want to show they'd caught someone, wouldn't they?" "Yeah, I suppose. Look, here's the stuff Mum got for you in Diagon Alley, and she's got some gold out of your vault for you, and she's washed all of your socks." He heaved a pile of parcels onto Harry's cat bed and dropped the money bag and a load of socks next to it. Harry started unwrapping the shopping. Apart from the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 4, by Miranda Goshawk, he had a handful of new quills, a dozen rolls of parchment, and refills for his potion-making kit. He had been running low on spine of lionfish and essence of belladonna. He was just punning underwear into his cauldron when Ron made a loud noise of disgust behind him. "What is that supposed to be?" He was holding up something that looked to Harry like a long maroon velvet dress. It had a mouldy-looking lace frill at the collar and matching lace cuffs. There was a knock on the door, and Mrs. Weasley entered, carrying an armful of freshly laundered Hogwarts robes. "Here you are," she said, sorting them into two. "Now, mind you pack them properly so they don't crease." You've given me Jenny's new dress," said Ron, holding it up to her. "Of course I haven't," said Mrs. Weasley. "That's for you. Dress robes." "What?" said Ron, looking horror-struck. "Dress robes," repeated Mrs. Weasley. "It says on your school list that you're supposed to have dress robes this year. Robes for formal occasions." "You've got to be kidding," said Ron in disbelief. "I'm not wearing that. No way." "Everyone wears them, Ron," said Mrs. Weasley crossly. "They're all like that. Your father's got some for smart parties." "I'll go starkers before I put that on," said Ron stubbornly. Don't be silly, said Mrs. Weasley. You've got to have dress robes. They're on your list. I got some for Harry too. Show him, Harry. In some trepidation, Harry opened the last parcel on his camp bed. It wasn't as bad as he had expected. However, his dress robes didn't have any lace on them at all. In fact, they were more or less the same as his school ones, except they were a bottle green instead of black. I thought they'd bring out the colour of your eyes, dear, said Mrs. Weasley fondly. Well, they're okay, said Ron angrily, looking at Harry's robes. Why couldn't I have some like that? Because, well, I had to get yours second hand, and there wasn't a lot of choice, said Mrs. Weasley, flushing. Harry looked away. He would willingly have split all the money in his Gringotts vault with the Weasleys, but he knew they would never take it. I'm never wearing them, Ron was saying stubbornly. Never. Fine, snapped Mrs. Weasley. Go naked. And Harry, make sure you get a picture of him. Goodness knows I could do with a laugh. She left the room, slamming the door behind her. There was a funny spluttering noise from behind them. Pidwidgeon was choking on an overlarge treat. Why is everything I own rubbish? Said Ron furiously, striding across the room to unstick Pidwidgeon's beak. Okay, so I know that I said that I would maybe do the chapter next, but it is getting late and I'm getting a bit tired, so I might wrap it up there. I hope that you've enjoyed it tonight and that there has been some improvement, because I have adjusted a few things. I've tried to be more conscious about how quickly I read. Anyway, please like and subscribe if you genuinely do, and feel free to share it with your friends. I really hope that I can help to relax people as I have been relaxed in the past by ASMR, because it's really helped me with a lot of things. So I hope you are very well. Signing out.